All right, well, let's get started then. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Amazon CloudFront and Lambda Edge. I want to take a minute and talk to you about the great service that we have to really show you how to get all of your content distributed globally in a tremendous amount of ease. So do you recognize any of these patterns? You have users that are kind of onboarding, and then all of a sudden you have this massive spike that occurs, and you become very worried. Can my infrastructure handle this? Is this going to be a problem? Well, these are the things that we actually can get taken care of for you with CloudFront distribution. So what are some of the challenges that you're actually running into for game delivery? For one, if you have slow downloads, your users are going to be less likely to adopt. They're going to abandon out, not finish the download, or not complete the patch. And this is a really big problem because abandonment is one of the bigger things, especially if you have a very rich content that they'll jump out of. And also, do you have enough peak bandwidth to handle these kind of spikes? At the same time, do you have the hardware capacity to handle that expected load? Are you underutilized? Are you overutilized? Are you paying more than what you should or paying less? At the end of the day, this is a really tough thing to keep up with. And then, of course, your user base is everywhere. They're global. So are you in the right places? You have people that are in another country that are trying to cross over the Atlantic just to get to your servers. This can be really problematic because your bandwidth will go kind of in peaks and lulls, and you'll start to kind of get what we call roller coaster bandwidth. And also, how are you securing your infrastructure? How do you know that the content you're actually pushing down is your actual content and doesn't have some sort of malware or somebody's backdoored it or something of that nature? This is a really big problem, especially if your title has come out and all of a sudden somebody's attached some sort of malware and your title is pretty much destroyed or becomes some sort of meme because it's been taken over by some Bitcoin mining software of some sort. So what is CloudFront? Well, for one, it's a highly flexible and performance secure CDN. So this actually gives you the performance to deliver content around the world globally at the best speeds so that your users get the best experience. At the same time, like I mentioned, the global reach behind this means you can be anywhere in many different countries and be able to get close to everybody that you actually want to. It has scalability, so whether you have a small number of users or a tremendous number of users, or you have a sudden spike that occurs, this is really important to be able to handle that scalability as it expands and collapses. And security to ensure that the content you actually put out is the content that will be delivered, and it will make it to the end of who you're looking to deliver it to. And of course, there's a self-service, full control API. This is really important because if you have content that's actually on the network and you want to make sure that if something's wrong or if there's a problem, that you can actually use the API to say expire the content and get it off the network and update it with what should be there, especially if you have patches or things of that nature or some sort of images that you want to have moved. Now, there are customers all across gaming in a lot of industries. As you can see, we work with everybody, media and entertainment, social media, enterprise, but especially in gaming, you'll find out that the millions and millions of customers who are playing games every day are already using our service. So, how are they actually using CloudFront? Well, for one, they're using it for fast, scalable downloads, like I mentioned. They want to make sure that the users get the content as fast as possible and that they're actually having the best experience, so they're not waiting and saying, well, maybe I'll go surf a page or go do something else. At the same time, they're using it to deliver the videos or their analytics or their game binaries. And this is really important because you don't want your videos actually skipping up or them actually breaking out of the experience because, again, that'll cause a distraction. Web portals. You really don't want to host all of this stuff on Iron because you want to make sure that you can scale it across all the users who are coming in just to see about your content. If your website's already slow when you're trying to deliver it in the first place, they're already half worried, can you deliver a game if you can't even put a website up? And then on top of that, security. Again, like we mentioned, we don't need people putting in side scripts and things of that nature into your web portal or into your game, causing a disruption or at least a misunderstanding of what you're delivering. And the other parts of it are the advanced customization with Lambda at Edge, which I'll go into, which is tremendous. That gives you a lot of computing power and scalability that otherwise wasn't there before. So we have a tremendous number of points of presence in multiple cities and multiple countries, and we have mid-tier caches to actually reduce the origin load. And so when we bring that up, what we're saying is that when somebody goes to pull that piece of content, they're going to first get a copy from your origin or your server. But then you have the mid-tier servers that can actually pull a copy of that in. So when they hit the closest node, they're not going all the way back to your origin. They'll actually hit one of the mid-tier caches in between to handle that load capacity. And also, you have pay-as-you-go fees. So there are no egress fees that are from within AWS. And so the more that you use, the more that you'll pay, but the less that you use, the less that you'll actually pay. This actually scales with your user so that we're kind of aligned at the same time so you can grow without putting yourself upside down. And also we have performance optimizations with CloudFront, such as request collapsing. Now this is really interesting. A lot of people don't realize, But if you have, let's just say you have people in 10 different countries that are pulling in content, and all of them turn around and request it, and it's not up on those cache servers. You don't want 10 requests coming back into your origin to try and fill that up. You want those to come into the first one and go, okay, let me get the first copy, hold the other ones up until we supply that copy, then go ahead and let them all get it at the same time instead of trying to hit your origin server all at the same time. And then, of course, we have TCP/IP optimizations for the network path, which means that you may think that it's the closest thing. You're going from the city that's right near you, but that may not be the closest path to you. And so we take a look at what the back-end tiers are and what the fastest path with the least latency and the most bandwidth that can actually arrive to you is used. And also we have the keep alive connections to reduce the actual time up between those, because you want to make sure that as this thing's delivering content, if you have a pause or a delay, that it doesn't kill your session and then you have to actually reconnect back, which is another delay as well. And then, of course, we have one of the largest backbone networks. We have more bandwidth than we know what to do with, and we are more than ready to supply it and to handle any kind of demand. And then, of course, we have the SSL and TLS optimizations to make sure that as the content's being delivered to you, that it's actually secure, then it comes across and it's actually the full integrity of the content that's being delivered to the end. And of course, fast content invalidations. This is where something's wrong on the network or you need to clear it or change it. You can actually use the API, invalidate it, clear it off the cache, you can put the right content in place or get it off your network. So some of the security capabilities with that, we have, of course, full HTTPS to make sure that when you're actually delivering, it's encrypted from end to end. We have geo restrictions so that if you want to make sure people who are in different countries that shouldn't have access to your content don't. We have field level encryption for post data. So if you happen to have a form with credit card and address, you want to make sure that each one of the systems only gets what it needs. So you may encrypt the credit card information, even though you've encapsulated both the credit card and the address information in your send block. So when it goes through to your systems, only the credit card system that has the private key can pull that data, and the systems that actually have the address handling can get the rest of the data in one push. And then, of course, restricted content, which is where you can set authorization and tokens to prevent people from actually getting content that they shouldn't have access to based upon what permissions you set for them. And then, of course, integration with AWS WAF and Shield for DDoS protection, which is really important. You don't really want people to go through and be able to start slamming your servers and take your servers offline so people can actually get to your content or can't get to your web server. We see this all the time, where different people just decide they're going to pick on a game and they'll take it down, and anybody can be a target no matter how big or how small. Serverless computing. So this is really interesting. Instead of having you stand up instances all over the place, you can actually leverage the CloudFront nodes themselves that are distributed for doing content as a form of a processing node. And so you can bring your Node.js to the edge and allow it to be processed at the edge on each one of these nodes by utilizing Lambda. And so by setting these up, actually within the API, you can set how the content is actually enabled so that it can be executed on the edges itself. This means you have a tremendous amount of distributed power instead of it coming back to one server or a handful of servers in a certain country. Now it's everywhere. So you have the fastest possible path, not only for distribution, but for execution. And the advanced customization. So that means you don't have to provision any servers. You're live, everything is there, and they're already up and running. And it scales with usage. The more people that come online, the more it's going to be able to do the compute, the more you're going to be able to distribute through. And you never have to pay for the idle time. Only when people are using it do you actually pay for it. And you have the full availability and fault tolerance. So if it tries to access a node and there's a problem, whether it's network or server side, it can easily jump to another node and continue processing, but it's completely seamless to the end user. And of course, it's globally distributed. That means no matter where your users are, they can access this content everywhere. And what that does at the end of the day is it's going to improve the viewer latency and simplify your origin infrastructure. This means you don't need a ton of iron to actually handle millions and millions of people at any point in time, whether they're just hitting you once or scaling throughout. So some of the CloudFront triggers that occur, so what happens is that the viewer is going to come in and do a Lambda request, and it's going to take a look and see, well, is that actually on the cache? And if it's not on the cache based upon the rule, then it's going to go to the origin. It's going to pull it from the origin, which in this case we have tied to an S3 bucket where you can store files and content. And that will come back out in the response to be picked up, back to the viewer response and come back. Now, if it is in the CloudFront cache, it doesn't even go back to the origin at all. It never sees it. It's actually being handled at the edge nodes, and that's where you can get the most scalability and computation power going on. So what are the edge uses case? Edge authorization. So these are things if you want to have certain tokens for people to access certain things, then you can actually have that distributed where it's able to carry those permissions and communicate back from the edge. A/B testing and cookie-based sticky sessions, all depending on how you want to do some of your session testing between 1 and 2. Because you actually have the JSON token that actually goes down the path, you can utilize this. Content customization. So being able to actually work with some of the different headers and some of the pieces to distinguish how you want it to actually operate URL customization so that you can use URLs that make a lot more sense instead of having some kind of tragic mess that's 150 characters just lined up on the string and nobody could ever figure out what that was you were trying to do. And then, of course, content-based dynamic origin selection. So depending on what your content is, it can actually pick where it's going to pull the origin, so it doesn't all have to be pinned just to one box. And then, of course, security. HSTS headers and bot management to make sure that you have the extra security layer on top of the HTTPS layer so that you can ensure that your content, even when it comes off from your application, from the browser to the edge, that is completely secured throughout the chain. Our on-demand pricing is, of course, published online. There are regional tiered rates. You pay as you go, and there is a free tier, so you can actually get into this right away and not have to get hammered with fees. So it's a great way for you to actually test the product, become accustomed with it, and see how it can work best for you. If you need a lot more capacity, you can actually set up reserve capacity, which reduces the prices even further, and we can do custom tailored contracts based on the use case, and of course a variable term, so you're not locked in forever. Price classes, you will optimize for cost, we have regional data transfer, and it's all user controlled. You can turn it on or off at any time, so you're not stuck into any kind of firm, hard commitment that you otherwise don't want to be able to deal with. Again, there are no data trees, data transfer fees from the origins to CloudFront. And we have free SSL TLS certs from the Amazon Certificate Manager. And same rate, whether it's a network for HTTP or HTTPS traffic, it doesn't matter to us. And of course, simple request fees. The edge pricing is based on the number of requests and the function to execute runtime. So if you have real simple fire-off things, it's just a matter of how many sheer requests that you make. Things that are a little more computationally expensive, that'll come into play, but you can measure those. And it's existing by the customer service plan. So to learn more, please go in and take a look at our class kiosk, protect your game servers from DDoS attacks. Really important to understand how it's being secured, and deploy your content to millions around the world where you can actually get a little more in-depth, take a look at some of the headers and have a good conversation with the engineers who really know what they're talking about. And then globally scaling game servers on demand, where you can take a look at how you get your servers that you want to stand up that have specific code, like game servers, to actually get these deployed around the world. So as you can see the value here of what we're talking about, this is a great way for you to be able to lower your infrastructure, have a very simple model that globally distributes around the world and scales as you go. Thank you very much.